Okay, I just need to check out. I just need to check out how many school teachers we've got in the room today. Always once a school teacher, always a school teacher. Oh yes, a fair smattering of school teachers. How many former pupils of Newbiggin Church School have we got with us today? There we are. Oh, good. A fair smattering of former church school pupils. How many radical feminists have we got here today?
Oh yes.
Right. Well, there's absolutely no excuse. Because this is a partial story. And Peter will put me right on some of it. This is a partial story of powerful women. And so what we need is participation, particularly from powerful women. So we need you to come and join in to flesh out some of this detail in particular. So anyway, we're going to start. And I can confess certain biases here because Mary Dawson, born Mary Curren, is my grandmother. And there we are. This is a tale of church. It's a tale of family. It's a tale of school, well, education. It's a tale of very 1920s brand of feminism, I would say. It's got a lot about protégés. It's got a little bit about private fostering, and it's got something about the statement she made to me once over a game of Monopoly one Sunday evening at 12 Buteland Terrace. Don't ever say impossible. Nothing is impossible. You can do anything. And that's a statement which stayed with me forever. And of course, she was right. So, next one, please. And just to welcome Zara here, who's doing a fantastic job on all the technology. Some of these faces on here give me the quivers, and we're not talking about many men this afternoon. But this is the face that scared me silly when I was about 3 years old. It was my grandfather, who was also called Hilton Dawson, and a little while ago, and unfortunately he's passed away now, but I had a really good conversation with a man who worked who was an apprentice at Newbiggin Colliery, and a lot of apprentices went through various parts of the pit when they started at the colliery, and a lot of them started off as the colliery blacksmith's striker, and this is the colliery blacksmith, and every morning at Newbiggin Colliery you'd be required to get in there from the age of 14 and get the fires lit and get all the tools put out and everything prepared, and bang on, clocking in time, Hilton Dawson would cycle up, be the last person to clock on, because by that stage, the gentleman told me Hilton actually thought that he owned the pit rather than just worked there. So he sort of cycled up there, last person to clock in, and the very first thing he'd say to you when you started helping him as his striker was, "Hit it harder, boy." He didn't have much time for children, I don't think. He didn't have a lot of time for women, really. He was a man of, notably a man of few words, but he was very much what you might call a man's man. He was, as I said, colliery blacksmith. In the First World War, he'd served throughout the first, through most of the First World War. He was a farrier, so he started off in one of the most ancient pursuits in the First World War, and then transferred very wisely to one of the most modern technologies in the First World War. He was a mechanic with the Royal Flying Corps for the last couple of years of the First World War. He was a key player in the Newbiggin Colliery Mechanics Lodge, who took lots of decisions. One decision they took was to return to work after at the end of the 1926 general strike. They also took lots of decisions about who was next in line for a colliery house. So a powerful group of men within the pit. He was very much involved in the Freemasons. He was the worshipful master of the Freemasons in the 1930s, and he was also secretary of the Bankhouse Club for a whole 30 years, 1928 to 1958. Part of his routine, as I've said, was turning up to the pit, being the last one to turn in. At lunchtime, he'd cycle down from the pit up to the Bankhouse Club to go and get his post, and check his post at the Bankhouse Club, and then cycle back to the pit. And at 9 o'clock every night, he'd go to the Bankhouse Club to check that everything was okay. So a man's man, a man's world. It's a world that's disappeared from much of. John.
Hilton, may I just interject?
You may, certainly. Please do. You're most welcome to.
He seems to have been a contemporary of my father.
Uh-huh.
My father was born 1890 as well.
Yeah.
My father endured First World War, but he was on the ground just on big guns.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure my father, I don't think, was a member of Bankhouse Club, but they were well known in Newbiggin.
Yeah. Baker.
Just noting the dates.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pringles Bakery. Yeah.
Crystal House.
But what did you say, Barbara? Halfpenny bread buns, John. Did you hear?
Sorry, I can't.
Barbara Martin said Pringles Bakery halfpenny bread buns.
Pringles Bakery, morning buns. Yes, I used to walk around, walking a basket full of buns, and I took my first basketful at the age of 7. And instructed to go out and sell them.
What was your round? Where did you go?
Sorry, didn't hear.
It's all right. It's okay. We'll pass on. But I just wanted to make that link with Barbara. That's good. Okay. Can you bash on through? Okay. So, huge story of Newbiggin is the transformation of the place at the beginning of the 21st century, with a vast influx of people coming here from all over the country, really, but the majority of them coming from places in Durham, and that's where this young bull of a man came from. He came with his father, William Dawson, who was shaftsman, and with his brother, Henry Darley Dawson, who was also a colliery blacksmith. And William Dawson was had moved around the various pits in the Durham coalfield. It started off at South Hetton, where Hilton was born. He'd also been at Bolden Colliery. He'd also been at Edmondsley near Chesley Street, and then they came up to Newbiggin. And this is very much the history of loads and loads of families in Newbiggin who came here. Some of whom stayed here. Some married into the fishing community here. Others moved off fairly quickly. Some went abroad as well. But very, very typical typical story. And Hilton married Mary Curren on April the 11th, 1915 at St Mary's, Woodhall. I think they must have met shortly before May 1911 when they came here. Sue says she thinks they probably met somewhere at church, but he was living at Edmondsley and she was working in a pub, and Sue says they probably met at church, but I think they met in the pub really. But she was 14, living and working in the pub, and he would be 20. It's like every parent's nightmare, isn't it? Really. But there we are. Okay, please pass that. And then we have a record of Mrs. Dawson, a teacher from Durham, who was appointed to the church school in 1919, and there she is in the top left-hand corner. And she was appointed by William Moore, the head teacher at the time, and we're going to come on to Mr. Moore in a minute. The greatest figure in education in Newbiggin history. Okay, so this is the Woodhall and Newbiggin National School, which opened on January the 11th, 1869. A handsome stone building erected on a site given by the late Major Creswell. Does everybody know where the school was? If you don't know where it was, it's on the site of the Balliol residential care home.
Yeah, the Cockney School, yeah.
Home now,
Was that the school on Woodhall Lane?
on Woodhall Lane, thank you. You took the words out of my mouth. That's brilliant. I was forgetting what the address was.
Well, my father attended.
Your father
May
attended.
have attended.
Right.
In school on
Excellent. Well, it opened on January the 11th, 1869. I mean, this is a great historic achievement, actually. It's there'd been an earlier school in Newbiggin. There were a couple of private schools at the time, but this actually anticipated the 1870 Education Act, which was the first time that it was said that primary education should be made available to all children aged between 5 and 13 years. So this was seen as, and it was, a great effort to put education within the grasp of Newbiggin children, and particularly the Newbiggin children of the working poor, the agricultural labourers and the people who worked in the pits around. There was no pit in Newbiggin at the time, and the children of fisher folk as well. So it's the first time that education was really made available to everybody. And started off with a man called Joseph Scott, who's the head teacher. So we'll carry on through, and then I go through a succession of head teachers, really. George Scott, John Dixon, George Smith, John Dixon, Thomas Chan. In 1884, there's loads of confusion about this. There was a new infant school linked with the church school, which was built on a site which was basically behind where the Indian restaurant is now, behind Prospect Place, and that started in 4th of February 1884, and that started under Margaret Miller, who was the head teacher. And Mrs. Miller is certainly out of what I've seen anyway, it's a bit difficult to get some of the records out of Woodhall archives, but Mrs. Miller is the best correspondent really about what things were like at the time, and she was not frankly impressed with the people of Newbiggin. First of all, they didn't send their children to school regularly. They didn't seem to appreciate the importance of education. If there was any thought of some worms needed digging or some bait getting coming off the rocks or anything, or if a boat was coming which needed unloading, then school had very low priority when all of that when all of that happened. And she was in a great rivalry with Mr. Brown, who had a private school which had been based actually in the Seaview Inn, in the back room of a pub, for goodness sake, but was then based at the Presbyterian Church Cottage, just on Gibson Street. And she had a great rivalry with Mr. Brown, and people were forever taking the kids out of school and sending them to Mr. Brown's school, and she thought he didn't give them a very good education at all. But Mrs. Miller really gives a good description of her travails in the school. But by anyway, in 1889, July the 26th, 1889, Mr. Moore arrived. I'm going to pass on to the next one. It's not a very good photo, and we'll have to get some enhanced photos really. But this is William Moore, who arrived in July 1889 and was due to leave in July 1920. He was about to retire, and he died very suddenly in June 1920. And I've never seen a memorial to a school teacher before, but his memorial, which is there, is very near the path, just going in the church gate at St. Bartholomew's. You can go and see it very easily, and it's been that memorial has been placed by his pupils in memory of a revered school teacher. And Mr. Moore was clearly held in great esteem by his pupils, and he stuck up for kids. Basically, he said that many of the children coming to the school were very impoverished, were very poorly fed, were very poorly dressed. He stuck up for them. He stuck up for education, and he was obviously held in the highest esteem. Passed on to all right. So we'll go on. This is a lady who never ever came anywhere near Newbiggin, as far as I'm aware, and she's called Mary Annie Robinson, 1871 to 1944, otherwise known as Aunt Nanny, and she's head teacher of Sacriston Catholic School, and she was aunt to the Curren girls, to Mary, to Emily, to Annie, to May, Zena, and to their brother Jack. And Jack's son is sat here today. And I don't know if you can see her there. She's got a brooch around her neck. I have that brooch now. It's been passed around the family and eventually arrived to me. It's a little piece of tin. But this photograph sat on my somewhere in my grandma's living room for the whole of the time I ever visited there. And this is a really powerful woman. She was a huge influence on education for a niece, Mary, and she was a huge influence on Catholicism. At the time in the Durham coalfield, there was a huge revival of Catholicism. A lot of priests coming from Ireland, a lot of people coming from Ireland to the Durham coalfield, and she was a real strong supporter of the Catholic faith, and she persuaded two of Mary's sisters, Annie and May, very much to convert to Catholicism, and I think Mary resisted that quite a lot. So there's a huge sort of religious thing there. But she was a very, very strong woman, very conservative woman. I understand she was a I can't think that there could have been that many of them, conservative councillor on Durham County Council at the time. But I've tried to find out more information about that and haven't really. But she was a very, very powerful influence on the whole family, and you can tell her steel there and her vigour. We'll pass on now.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
At that time, could anybody set themselves up as a teacher, or did they have to have certain qualifications to be a teacher?
Well, that's a very good. That's a really good point. You would have to have some sort of qualifications if you were being appointed by some sort of body such as a church or whatever. But people probably could set themselves up as teachers or educationalists without any qualifications. And the way to get qualified was often through people being pupil. We're going to come on to this. Through being pupil teachers and learning on the job, and then going on to college or some sort of institution. But we're going to come back to that in a minute. Anyway, this chap is Morgan Robinson. I don't know how well you can see, but he sat there with Aunt Nanny, with Mary Ann. He stood there next to a 1920s biplane, which he actually went up in the years just after the First World War. This is Mary. This is Mary Dawson's grandfather. It's my great grandfather, Peter's great grandfather. He's Morgan Robinson is almost partly the history of the coal industry. He was working at the pit at the age of 8. So sometime in the 1850s, when he had all the toes on his left foot chopped off in an accident. At the age of 11, he was actually down the mine. I don't think he was even allowed down the mine in the 1850s when he was injured, but he was allowed down the mine by the time he was 11. And he was scarred for life across his back in an explosion in the pit. And at the age of 20, he had the very good sense to get married to a woman who owned a pub. So that probably saved his life, really. Probably made his life as well. And by the early 20th century, he was landlord of the Red Lion in Clawsworth, which is just north of, just between Chesley Street and Durham City, just north of Durham City. And he was a pirate, really. I think he was a gambler. He was a backer of prize fighters, of bare-knuckle prize fighters, of races, horse races and running races and professional races. He was an absolutely arch conservative, all for king and country, and again you sort of wonder about that in the midst of the Durham coalfield and coming from a mining background. Having said that, he'd apparently always give a donation to miners who were out on strike. So there, but he was an immense character, really, in that part of the world. And in the 1911 census, Mary Curren isn't living with her parents and all her sisters, and Jack hadn't even been born by then. But she wasn't living with them. She was living with Morgan Robinson, her grandfather, and with her with her Aunt Nanny at the Red Lion in Clawsworth. But huge influence on anybody. This man, really quite So you can join in, you know. It's okay.
Hilton,
Yes.
he might have come across my granddad, Thompson,
Uh-huh.
because he was a bare knuckle
Well,
fighter.
there we are.
And he had a pub in Durham. He was
Yeah.
a publican for a while in Durham.
Right. Okay.
So maybe the cross paths, yeah.
I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah, but quite something. So this is Mary, and it's quite a nice photo of her. As we said, older sister of Emily and Annie and May and Zena, and eventually of Jack. She started as a pupil teacher by the age of 12. She was a pupil teacher. She was very much in the mould of Aunt Nanny and sort of following her into education. But then she was seen that she married Hilton Dawson in 1915, not down in Durham, but up in Woodhorn. And then she was a mother to Harry shortly after that at 19. So I think that probably got in the way of the development of her career. As soon as they were married, he was away back to the war. He was conveniently off the scene for most of 1950. But he was away back to the war, so she went back to the parents in Durham to actually have the baby, and didn't actually come back to Newbiggin until 19, with the war over, and Hilton returned to work at Newbiggin Colliery as a colliery blacksmith. And in 1921, they're living at 32 Front Street in Newbiggin. You couldn't get a job as a teacher. If you're a woman, you couldn't get a job as a teacher if you were married. You couldn't get a job as a teacher if you had a child. Mr. Moore would have known that she was married. And he also certainly knew that she had a child, because there she is on the photograph with the child. That's my dad on that school photo. And by the time he appointed her, she'd also been pregnant with their second child, with Zena. So I mean, this is highly unusual that a married woman with a child, with children, a pregnant woman, can get a job in a school, and it would certainly have only worked actually in a church school in a Church of England school in those days. So that's quite a fortuitous sort of coming together. And with Hilton back from the war, she carried on having babies as well. So she had Kathleen in 1922, and she had George in 1924. And then she, in order to help with all of this, because Hilton wouldn't be bothered, he'd be at the pit and then he'd be at the club and getting on with stuff there. So she imported her sister, gradually imported her sisters one by one to Newbiggin. So Emily came up first of all to stay with them, and Emily got married to somebody in Newbiggin, went off to live her life. So she brought up Annie, and Annie came to look after the kids and support her. And there's a story of a breastfeeding all of these children, and running home at lunchtime up to Collingwood Road by the time to feed whichever child it was, and then run back to school. So this would not be happening in any other school you can think of, in any other workplace you can think of, and it's just amazing to me, really, that this went on. And after Annie met somebody else and then got married and all the rest of it, and had her own family. She also brought other young women from Newton. Some of them young women who've been at the school to come and live with the family and support the family and support her in her career. She was always absolutely determined that she was going to have a career in teaching, and that was absolutely the forefront of everything. My grandma did about as much housework as I do, frankly. And you know, she once said to me, I've always had servants, because this is all that she was focused on: having a career, education, teaching children, doing what she wanted to do. It's an this is so different from the experience of so many other women at this time in the 20s. Does anybody want to say anything?
I was just going to ask if you know does anybody know any of the pupils on there? Do we know any of the names?
Yeah, that one's Billy Fennick, who everybody knows.
Hilton,
Yes,
do you know the date of that photograph?
yes, it's 1919.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
That kills a theory of mine.
Right. The photograph came from Gordon Downey, who's actually Billy Fennick's grandson, and he said, "Here's a photograph of my dad at my granddad at school," and I pointed out it's also a photograph of my dad at his school as well. That's a pretty good one, really. But again, I sort of, when did you bring your children to work? I mean, bring your child to work sounds a very sort of modern concept.
I don't think she would have taken him to work, though. That was probably just for a photograph. Howard thing. I don't think.
Okay, sorry, what do you say?
I just said, I can remember a teacher at Newbiggin, at the little infant school that is no longer there.
Yeah.
And I think she was on supply.
Yes.
She was on supply. We were short of teachers, and so she as a favour, she came in, but she brought her baby in the pram
Right.
and parked it outside the classroom.
Right.
And then she did her job. Yes, and that was probably 70s. Probably 1970s.
Maybe Harry was at school then.
Okay, pass on. So, I mean, let's talk about Newbiggin in the 20s. We're talking about real hard times. I mean, the war had ended. People had come back from the war. A lot of people came back carrying terrible injuries, mental health problems, as well as physical problems. But the economy was in absolute shreds as well. The Newbiggin Coal Company built that fine memorial to all its workers who'd actually gone to war. But by the time they were building the memorial, they were cutting the wages of their workers. Mr. Moore, who'd absolutely led the church school, died, as we heard, very suddenly in 1920, and he was replaced by Thomas Thompson. And in 1925, he was replaced by Fred Hollingsworth. Does anybody have any memory of Fred Hollingsworth?
Was he secretary of the High Court at one time?
Yes, quite possibly, yeah. But he was again another huge figure in Newbiggin during the war. He was head of the Home Guard, and
I think him and my granddad were being coxswains that had one or two barneys between them.
all right. I don't think he was the easiest man to get on with, but anyway. So Fred Hollingsworth, we'll talk about Fred Hollingsworth a bit more. So he arrived, but I mean, during the 20s, this is real poverty in Newbiggin. Short time at the pit. A lot of people laid off. A lot of people being locked out at the pit. The huge lockout that was actually the general strike of 1926. A lot of people, including Hilton's brother Darley, moved away from Newbiggin in that time. A lot of them went south to work in other coal fields or work at places like Coventry or in London, in factories. A lot of people emigrated from Newbiggin at that time, went to Australia, went to Canada to build new lives there. The whole population of Newbiggin actually reduced during the 20s because it was such hard times here. And I'm Labour, me. I'm socialist, me. My grandma died in the wool, Conservative, I think, if you really asked her. I think she probably held most politicians in equal contempt, really, but she was all for the church rather than the state. But one really radicalising story that she told me of the day that her big, strong husband came back, and you've seen the size of him, you've seen the sort of man that I think he was. He came back actually in tears from the pit, because with short time and with reduced wages and all the rest of it, he came back with threepence that he'd been given in wages from the pit. That's 3 old pence, so less than a penny probably in today's currency, and that was his wages from the pit. And the whole of Newbiggin is experiencing this, and I suppose that with her wages coming in as well, this is one of the few families living at the colliery there which actually have 2 wages coming in at the time as well. But really, really, really hard times for Newbiggin.
Mr. Hollingsworth's son was killed during the war.
Hey, fantastic! This is brilliant. Yeah, I know. We're going to come right on to it.
My mother insisted that I went there instead of the modern school when I didn't pass the 11 plus. And Tour Armstrong and I went there, and Mr. Hollingsworth was the headmaster. It was very, very nice. But Mrs. Dawson was my teacher. She was a lovely woman. She used to reminisce.
That's a good thing to do. Get the teachers talking, and then you don't have to do any work. We're going to come right on to that. Okay, this is great. People anticipating this all the way through. Okay, there we go, Zara. Okay, so mass unemployment and looming war. Harry went to Durham University on a grant because he was going to become a teacher. That was the way for working class people to get into universities at that time. You could get a grant if you were...
Oh, again, you might have come across.
Sorry?
Oh, sorry, I was actually talking to myself. I forget I'm on speaker. my dad went to Durham University, so he might have come across him there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know anything about soup kitchens in Newbiggin? During this great time of poverty.
Absolutely. We're going to talk more about this when we do the general strike. But they had soup kitchens at the pubs and the clubs, and everybody in Newbiggin really rallied. A lot of people in Newbiggin really rallied round at the time. I mean, these are very, very hard times.
My dad remembered them. Yeah.
So I mean, her own family went on to higher education. Zena went to Teachers Trade College. Kay went to Durham as well. George went to King's College, Newcastle. But then there's also the impact of the developing war as well as poverty on school children and the staff. And then the universal disaster in September 1940, which absolutely affected children who were at that school. The Dawson family were three members of the Dawson family were lost in the universal disaster. In some of the previous records of the church school, you can see, and now we know who these people were, but you can see things like the 1904 disaster. You can see that reflected in the description that the teachers have about the morale of the children at the time of the 1904 disaster, and the time when a man called John Jefferson was drowned in the bay as well. But I know that the universal disaster with children who we all know here, Mary Dickman and people who were pupils at that school, and that must have been absolutely devastating time for the children, for the teachers to try to support those children who'd lost their parents, lost their cousins, lost their uncles in that terrible tragedy. That's Mr. Hollingsworth on the top right there, and that's a man called Alex Fotheringham, who was a teacher. I think these people, I think that lady in the front might be Mrs. Hollingsworth. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure about that. Anyway, so that's the 30s, and then on the next slides are the point about Tony Hollingsworth. He was killed in Normandy in 1944, and both of Mary's sons were away in the army. Zena's fiancé Leslie Simpson, who we remembered one November in here, was killed on a training mission with the RAF in the USA. And there must have been so many other children, you know, the 150 men from Newbiggin killed in the Second World War. Newbiggin was bombed on November the 7th, 1941. There must have been so many children who were affected.
I have a photograph of Leslie Simpson.
Sorry?
I have a lovely photograph. But I didn't know he had it was Tom's mother's cousin, but I didn't know that was the fiancé.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
So I can pass that on because I don't know it.
All right,
And
thank you.
he's RAF.
Yes, thank you. I think you've given us a copy of it.
I have that.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Mary, I mean, she opened up the family home and welcomed, I mean, obviously there are a lot of people from the army in particular, but also from the RAF stationed around here defending the shores, and she was one of the people in Newbiggin. I think there are probably quite a lot of people in Newbiggin who opened up their own homes and invited people in, and just invited them to come round and have a bit of time with the family and have a cup of tea with the family and just get to know some of the local people. But she did that very, very, very willingly, and I think was an important part of her life at the time. Please pass on. And then, I mean, there's this extraordinary event, really, that she did mentor young people. She sometimes mentored young people to get them to come and work for her as well. But she mentored young people. I think people will correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that she often gave the young women in a class a book about domestic science and things like that. I've seen several of those over the years. She had a whole list of young men she mentored who were thinking about going into the church. I mean, she was quite a passionate Christian, really, member of the Church of England, so she had all of that. And then she had this extraordinary thing, and she did this entirely off her own back. One evening, one of the soldiers that she'd befriended came to the house and told her, well, his wife was dead. He'd been posted abroad and he had no one to look after his son Peter. The man was called Jim Glass. And my granddad was out at the club at the time. I don't think there was anybody else in. But she just said, well, just bring him here. And he came and he stayed. And he stayed.
I knew Peter Glass. He was in my class at school. Peter Glass was in the same class
Yes.
as
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. And Peter made himself very much at home. I mean, he just arrived the next day, I think.
Yes, I knew Peter Glass. He was lovely,
Yeah.
and he was in the church choir,
Yes.
and so he used to come to the youth club afterwards and join in with everybody. He was a really, really nice lad, very good looking, and he went to grammar school. I wasn't sure, did he go to Bedlington or Morpeth? He went to one of them.
I'm not sure of that.
No. And then, of course, he went away to university, and we lost touch. But I heard about him from Anne, your cousin Anne, would tell me what was going on.
Yeah.
And he did extremely well. And didn't he marry an ex-ballerina?
I don't think she was a ballerina.
Was she?
I don't know. Judith, just still on the go. I'll ask her.
Judith's still alive. I don't think Judith, well, I've never heard she was a ballerina.
Oh,
well,
Anyway,
sorry.
She could have been.
well, she's very, she's very good at yoga, so very
Very simple.
very simple, that's the word.
Yeah. So she just took Peter in, and Peter became a fifth child, and called her mum, and she was, and his children are our cousins, and they're part of the family. And Peter rose, I think very much what you say. Peter was a very charismatic person, very good looking, very good humoured young man, and I think he failed his exams in the first stage. He dropped out of university. He messed it all up through doing the usual things about having too good a time, I think, and then joined the army and rose to become a brigadier and get the MBE. And unfortunately, he didn't live too long, 65 when he died. But that decision about, well, bring him here is still there, still live for our family. We're in touch with these people to this day. Quite extraordinary. And here's the class of 1950 with people who people will know here. And she didn't actually have a teaching qualification. And it was after the war she actually got the chance to go and get one. And the family moved to 12 Euclid Terrace, which I grew up believing was the sort of equivalent of Buckingham Palace, because that was where you went to see the Queen. To see the Queen. And as a very young child, six or seven, I knew that every Sunday when we went round to Grandma's, we'd get the story of how awful Mrs. Rowlands had been the last week. Mrs. Rowlands was the head teacher of the church school by then. And Mrs. Rowlands, as far as I was concerned, at the age of 6, 7, 8, and 9, was the devil. Mrs. Rowlands had done everything wrong. What Mrs. Rowlands had done this week was, oh my goodness. Sorry? Well, there we are. June got the strap off her, so there we are. But she was very. I mean, Mrs. Rowlands could have been a paragon actually, but she was very thwarted because she really wanted in the way that Hilton thought he was the king of the pit. I think she thought she was the queen of the church school anyway.
When I was in Mrs. Rowland's class
Yeah.
at school, I always remember, she was a tyrant, she was horrible. But like, in front of the windows, she had all these plants, geranium plants, and the smell, the geraniums. And if I smell geraniums now, it takes us back to when I was at school. People getting the strap and you look the wrong way, you got the strap.
perhaps she had something to complain about for Mrs. Rowan. And then Hilton died in February 1958, I presume through pipe smoking. I mean, he always smoked this incredible pipe. He had this huge desk which was absolutely impregnated with tobacco smoke. And so he died fairly soon after he retired from work. But at 62, she just carried on teaching. Next one, and then in the 1960s, Kay, her daughter's brother-in-law, who's a playwright called David Mercer, wrote a play called A Way of Living, which is set in Newbiggin. It was about fisher girl meets collier lad, and it's sort of Romeo and Juliet thing, how the families are fighting it out together, but they fall in love. And my grandma was absolutely made up about this, just fantastic. David Mercer had stayed with her for a time. She tried to mentor him in the past as well. She was absolutely in a pomp. And then this play was filmed in Newbiggin, and everybody was very excited about it. And then it was shown on Armchair Theatre, and it was a pretty poor play, really, wasn't that great? But she was very disappointed in it and pronounced that there was far too much sex in it, and the fisher folk weren't like that. So there we are. So the 60s, sexual revolution of the 60s, despite her apparent feminism of the 1920s, didn't go down that well, really. Please pass on quickly. Yes.
Yes, you've only got to look at your own family tree, that big Newbiggin family tree,
Yes.
to realise that assertion that sex wasn't practiced amongst the fisher folk, realise that it's not true.
Yeah, I don't think anybody believes that, Jim. Yeah, I don't. Maybe she did. I don't know. But anyway, there we are. Yeah. No, I'm sure it's absolutely not true. No. And she retired from the church school, and she'd been there so she'd been 44 years at the church school. And the church school, as we know, eventually closed in 1968, and that was after 99 years. When a great service, actually, to the children. She's one of the people, she was the first person I said to, you should write a book, and she never did, but she could talk like, and oh my goodness, she could talk. Goodness me. She could talk like anything. And I'm sad about this because at the age of 9, she asked me to come down from the colliery school. I was always going to go to the colliery school because, first of all, my mother would never have allowed her to teach me, and also because the church school didn't have a football team, so it was definitely no worth going. But anyway, I was asked to come down to the colliery school, from the colliery school, to help her clear a room out at the church school. And at age 9, I didn't think anything of that, and didn't realise the significance of that. But I would love to have a little bit of film looking at that, and I wondered what that was like. It was the first and only time I was ever in the church school to go and help my grandma collect her stuff from there. And I just wonder what she was like, just looking around and just clearing everything. There's nobody else there. I don't remember anybody else there being there at the time. And then after that, it must have been the summer after that summer. In those days, the church had all these events, like garden parties and bazaars and things, and always opened by somebody with a big hat, usually with a big hat. And this year it was my grandma with a big hat opening the bazaar, and that was the first time that I really understood how big a figure she was for the village. And first time I thought, oh, you could be a politician, get up on a platform and make a speech or something. But I really was impressed with her now. And you know, there was no question of her stopping teaching after the church school. She carried on doing supply teaching. And there's one of her pupils sat over there. What was she like for you?
As a supply teacher, I mean, I went to school in Ashington, and my teacher, Mrs. Smith, when I was in the third year juniors, was also the swimming teacher. So every Thursday, she took, you know, all the different groups to the baths at Ashington, one group after another, one age group after another. And your grandma was the supply teacher who filled in for Mrs. Smith on a Thursday. So I was quite, I mean, of course I hadn't met you then, but I was quite taken by it because she had such presence. You know, she was really, I didn't know who she was. She was just a supply teacher, but she was very, very stately. And whether that was because of her age that I thought that, or what, because, you know, she would have been getting on by then. But she was very nice, but she was quite strict. And I remember cursive writing, those of us of a certain age had to practice the cursive writing, and she was very particular. I mean, I was quite a good writer, but I was terrified that I made the tiniest error, and not because she was fierce or, you know, but because she expected good work from you. But if you could get her onto a tale, you'd be doing okay, because she had quite a lot of stories that you could, you know, that she liked to tell you. But she was lovely. She was a lovely teacher. But when Hilton, when I first started to go out with Hilton, when we were, I think I was 17, we were probably 18, and he told me who his grandmother was. And I thought, oh, I'm probably going to have to go and meet this woman. And I was really quite worried about meeting her, but I needn't have been, because she was absolutely lovely, and was lovely the whole of the rest of her life to me, certainly.
Yeah, so she carried on teaching until she was at least 70. Nothing is impossible.
Yes, that's my
She passed away February 24th, 1986, which is 40 years ago, this Tuesday coming. And
That's my
she's always with me. And that's with her eldest great-grandchild, who's now 48.
She can't possibly be.
Goodness. And I just think she's indomitable, and I can summon her up when I want to. She's sometimes in whatever comes out. So please pass on. I used to think that she came from another world. She came from a Victorian world of values and stories with a moral purpose, and she absolutely hammered stories into me and my brother, and I'm sure to Peter and his brothers. But I think that world of Newbiggin by the sea, with the church school and the pit and the railway and the gasworks and all the fisher folk is another world as well, just as far away from it. And I sort of wonder about the influences that we have, and don't know whether that's teachers or grandparents or really powerful people, and how we're influenced in the whole of our lives really by people and those times in these very different times we're in.
I remember that she was a nice person.
Yeah.
She was a lovely teacher. She was a lovely woman.
That's nice.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Here's a former head girl. Do you want to say something? Yeah, right. What year were you in? What years were you in the church school? infant
We were
school.
all playing
Yeah.
at the top of the moor,
Yeah.
and we came down singing to the schools on.
So I reckon that somebody said that was 1949. Oh, bless her, Margaret Emery. In preparing for this, I was listening to some a tape we've got, a recording we've got of Carol Sampson talking about the research that she'd done about the church school. And on that recording, it's Carol Sampson, Bill Sampson, our Anne, Anne Young, and Margaret Emery. And it was lovely. It was sad listening to that recording with all of those people. But Margaret Emery told me that story
Yes,
as well
yes.
about the infant school.
And we went from the, of course, we were off school a few weeks, and then we went to the church school.
Right, and that was the end of the infant school
Yes.
then. It was just turned into the British Regis now.
Actually,
now a house. I think.
my gran lived facing the school in
Yeah.
Prospect Place, number 4.
Right,
Because
right.
Jim Armstrong and that's actually my cousin.
He is, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you there, Jim?
Just a second. Yes, I am. Yes, I'm Rita's cousin.
Yes, you are. Yeah. So we've got a good memory there. Yeah. And I'm your fourth cousin or something. I'm Jill's fourth cousin.
Yes.
Yeah. So there we are. So come and join in.
Me?
Yeah.
I went to the church school, but I started at the little school, so just started in the juniors, and
You started the West End in infant school.
yes,
Yeah.
the little school. We
Yeah.
were at the little school.
Yeah.
So I did first, second, and third year juniors, standard 1, 2, and 3, and Mrs. Dawson retired the summer before I would have gone up to her class.
Right.
I was so relieved. I was terrified of her. She was so strict in school. Yeah, and she did she have a belt or did she have the cane?
Oh, probably.
Because I remember people having the belt.
It's a shame that Joan Cuthbert isn't here because she would tell you the answers to all of those things. Joan, remember.
Well, Peter's brother John has this wonderful story about how he was in a class at the church school, and they were doing a play, and he was as part of this play, he was acting in it. He had to go and stand outside the classroom and wait to come in. And my grandma came down the corridor and assumed he'd been sent out for doing something bad, so took him off and belted him. It's different times, isn't it? And I mean, I'm sure there are people with different memories of her than some people here have. I'm sure she laid about people sometimes as well. I think those were different days, really. Does any of that make sense to people? I mean, does it sort of accord with people's ideas about
Well, I can remember people, my grandmother talking about Mrs. Dawson. She was revered.
Yeah.
She was revered in Newbiggin as being, an outstanding person.
Yeah.
And I can just, the way she took. I did visit her house once with Peter Glass.
Yeah.
But she was an old lady to me then.
Yeah.
And didn't she have arthritis? She seemed to have problems later in
Yeah.
life.
Oh, sure.
Yes,
I'm sure.
walking and things. Yes. But she was very well respected in Newbiggin.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I felt, sorry,
Sorry.
I felt she was a very old lady to be teaching when I was at church.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. My mother had, my mother was a teacher and was also a daughter-in-law, my goodness, and she had various views on her. They got on very well most of the time, I think. But she told me this. My mother went to the colliery school, and she told me this story about how she'd been going up the road to the colliery school one day, and she saw this teacher out in the yard, and she was wearing these enormous knickers doing PE with the kids, and yelling at the kids with these enormous knickers on. And she thought, oh, for goodness sake, I'm glad I go to the colliery school. I don't have to go to the church school with that woman there. And then she turned out to be her mother-in-law. she was quite a character.
She was lovely. I knew her through the church all my life, and she was really lovely. Church of England, St Bartholomew's.
Yes.
So do you think she had a classroom persona and a
Yes.
private persona?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. Well, you saw both, didn't you? The classroom persona and the private.
Absolutely, but I mean, when she was, how old would she be when she was doing supplies, Ashington? She would be
Late
70-ish.
60s, nearly 70s.
And she certainly wasn't, I mean, you revered her, but I wasn't frightened of her, and she certainly didn't use any punishment at all. But, you know, she was really very pleasant and very kind. She was very kind to the pupils, you know. She knew the ones who needed help, and she knew the ones who weren't very well off. And she would make a point of supporting them in whatever way she could. You know, being kind, particularly kind to some of the children in the class who, you know, came from poor backgrounds.
Okay, we'll go to anybody else has anything? We've got to have the raffle. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you, folks. Yes, please, yeah.
My brother wants to join the genealogy group.
Yes.
I've sent you a cheque with some money in to pay for his registration.
Oh, thank
And
you.
also his address in Australia and his email address.
Right.
So if he could be added to the list of contacts when you send
Certainly
things out as
will,
well,
yeah.
that would be
Yeah,
great.
we'll try and get him on from Australia. Yeah.
Yes. Okay then, thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Sue. Thanks very much to Zara for handling all the technical side of it. Immaculately. Cheers, John.